Christine, you mentioned this young neighbor, Jewish neighbor who disappeared. Were there other instances of people who disappeared? When were you aware of the
Actually,
Jewish
very
problem?
young. The word concentration camp, which in German you briefly write KZ, KZ.
That's it. And I remember very well that when I said to Frau Abraham, because Christine was always a favorite of hers, she got desserts there, she went to Frau Abraham, got dessert, and so, and then Mommy one day, you came home and no dessert, no nothing, and then Mommy only said, I hope she's with God already. Mommy said to us, Frau Abraham. So, and Herr Steinberg and everybody was missing.
So that was all that was said by your mother, and you just
Although you see
internalized
now,
what would have been
I
happening.
have a memory, and that a downstairs neighbor, Rosekam, she was a good friend of Mrs. Abraham, Frau Abraham, and so she said it was in November of 39, after the Polish War was already over. And she said, I'm going to visit and say goodbye to Frau Abraham. She's leaving. And so she's wanted to come along. And I did. And that was a very strong memory I have. And then on the way, Frau Zekam must have told me that she was being sent to Poland. Because I remember that so keenly, because I said to her, Poland, I said, everything is destroyed there. My vision of an 11-year-old was there was not a house with a roof.
Sure.
And it's cold there. And how could she survive? And, Frau Zekam couldn't say much of anything either. So we visited there, and I remember playing piano there, because they said, well, why don't I play a little something, which I did. And, it's a very bittersweet memory there, And then after that, but then, when I did the research for my paper at Bowdoin, I discovered that she had moved for 2.5 years, to the bigger city, Bremen, near Worpswede, and stayed there with 2 sisters-in-law. And then the three of them were deported to Theresienstadt, which is near Prague.
And Christine went to Theresienstadt and visited the place.
I've gone since then to the, because I just wanted to do that. And so after that, of course, that's the whole thing. Everything was shut down. You never heard the name of Frau Abraham again, except we might say it. But when I went back, that was in 01. No, 03, when I went to Prague and to Theresienstadt, and it was such an uncanny thing. It's a very small town. It's now repopulated again by Czech people, and those days, evidently, it was around 41 or whatever, it was completely cleared of all the native population there. The whole town became a concentration camp. And it was from way back from Austria, a time of Austria, it had been a garrison city. And so they had barracks there, about 3 or 4 stories high. This is where people were. And, I'll give you that, I'll let you have that paper sometime that I wrote about it. Because it was an incredible experience.
I have it at home,
and
now, as a concentration camp, does that mean it started as what they called the ghetto, where they just kind of
It was like a
them
ghetto,
off?
but they had one section that was called the Small Fortress, die Kleine Festung, where they did indeed have, really barracks, locals, where people worked a lot. But a lot of the people in Theresienstadt who were sent there, were deported to it, were elderly people, and not just Jewish people, but also what we call, gypsies. What is the word we use, really?
Gypsy,
No,
there are many
but
gypsies.
yeah.
He killed everybody who wasn't blue eyes and blonde hair.
And
So
also anybody who was homosexual, anybody who was socialist,
Yeah.
that they were all in that town.
All the people
yeah.
that Hitler
Now,
felt
and,
were worthless.
Yes, and they were, I think people died there probably as much from hunger and disease as anything. But then, after I had written the paper, I got in touch with, I guess I talked to somebody I knew from Prague, and I said, I'd like to find out a little bit more about Frau Abraham, because her name was not in the memorial book where they had listed all the people who died there. And I always had a feeling, even when I was there that day, I said, I just don't know whether she really died here, whether she was killed, died, whatever. So I wrote to this agency in Prague, and wrote in English. I said, because I don't know, what language you would use, but and I gave her name and the approximate dates that I knew, and then I got a very brief note back and said, prisoner, Rosa Abraham, etc., etc. was deported to Theresienstadt on such and such a date. Train number, her number, train number, the whole thing. Everything was recorded. And then, within 2 months, she was sent to Treblinka, which was a death camp, and she was killed there. But even there, for that, they had the train number.
The records, that is just
Records.
amazing.
I mean, that was so scary. When I got that email, I mean, it makes you shiver, even today. So I forwarded it right away off to Steve, of course, to Steve Surf, because he had gone that whole way with me. And it was unbelievable. Now, there's one thing that still is on my mind, and it bothers me some. I continue to be in touch with Frau Abraham's grandson and his wife, and of course they believe that she died with her 2 sisters-in-law in Theresienstadt.
When people don't ask, they rather
No,
not
that's
know.
right. Now,
He
Which tells
killed
a huge
7
story.
million.
yeah. So that.
Besides the war, everything else.
Yeah. So that was pretty significant.
We were 2,000 in the camp, and the Air Force. We were about 480 left, and I just took off. We had to, all the lights had to be put out when the British or the American came, and then I said, this is it, because Angela, when she visited me, she brought me a pair of shoes, she brought me a skirt, she brought me a jumper. You could not go away with your uniform, So we went.
She did these in pieces?
Yeah, in
to
pieces.
snip
Yeah,
these pieces
whenever
into
she
you to
came,
be
yeah.
prepared for you to leave.
So suddenly just took off with 2 other friends, and they walked and they took the train. And
And we
at
took
night.
a cargo train, and all of a sudden, Barbara read there something blowing off of the bomb, and then sit down. I said, don't. She wanted to scream and all that in that cargo train, like where they put cattle, like Omar Sharif and that nice film from Russia, Tara.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And then Charlie suddenly arrived.
Yeah.
We were all the last week of the war. The English were,
The enclave.
That's
in
right.
Germany.
They, the cannonballs, etc., whatever they use, I forget. Whatever they were directed at our town. So we lived in the basement for about a week. And but the shooting also was intermittent. So we figured out very soon there would be 20 minutes between another barrage. So then we could run upstairs. We never lost electricity during that time, so we could cook. And then we would run downstairs again. And then I think almost the last day, just before the war ended,
I came on the 26th of April,
Yes.
and on the 8th of May there was peace.
But the 1st of May is when the English came to town.
When the English came to town. And I screamed in the garden and said, hello! And Angela said, shut up, don't do that! And I was so happy to see them!
But she was so scared, because they were carrying weapons, of course.
Sure. And
Of
I'm
course
not afraid because I was surrounded by weapons there.
Yeah, yeah. But
Do
I
you remember the English coming, Christine?
Oh yes, I do.
Oh, yeah? Sure.
It was the 1st of May. It was a beautiful sunny day, and we had no bombing into Mopsveda at all. It was silent. So the 3 of us crept upstairs, went through the garden, and at the point of our garden where we have one street, we could look down where 2 other streets converged. And there we suddenly saw the first Englishman, walking like this with a gun. That's what scared Angela, of course.
And I was so happy.
And suddenly it was over.
Yeah.
And we could say what we wanted to say.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't imagine that. And we did. And that evening already, we celebrated. The English came to the house, and we had buried some wine. My mother made us bury, just in case people wanted to plunder and get, drunk and everything else. So we dug up the wine, and we sang English songs. And I learned, drink to me only with thine eyes.
And it's a long way to Tipperary.
Oh, right.
Oh, yes.
And so we celebrated. It was so amazing.
Now, how old were you both at that time?
Well, for me, I was 17, not quite 16 and a half.
I was just 20 or 20, going on to 21.
Yeah, that's right.
I was 2.5 years in the war.
Yeah, and so it was absolutely amazing. I mean, that moment of euphoria, And then, of course, after that, things were very difficult. Because even though we knew about concentration camps, nobody could imagine what happened there.
No.
I mean, to this day, I cannot say to myself, how could anybody do those things, So, but that came up, and, it was a bad time.
So with the joy, there was
Yeah,
this
of
horror.
course.
all
And
the
then, of
things that
course,
were
we were
happening.
still very, very hungry because there was no food.
And the Americans came and there was music. They put on lines from one tree to the other and foxtrot and jitterbug. Oh,
Johnny
I
loved
felt
it, yes.
so happy.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Oh.
And I see Angela coming with a bucket of cream from the. We had to
From the
eat.
dairy,
They opened
yeah.
dairy.
Yeah.
They opened all the shops, and there was food. You know, he just we didn't get it because it was for the army only,
Right.
I know, yeah.
and we ate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible what happened there. But then, first the English were in Bobswede and then the Americans came.
And so that's when you met your husband, when the Americans
No,
came?
later than that.
Later than
Because
that.
they arrived already in 45 and I met Pete the following March
Okay.
in 46. Yeah.
And how did you meet?
Well, amazingly enough, I was invited to a tea party. Actually, Charlie was invited.
But I didn't
To a
want him
friend,
to
but
go.
Charlie wasn't there. You
Yeah.
were in Bremerhaven.
Bremerhaven. I
Yeah.
worked already in the stationery where Americans came in, the other going home, and so I worked in the RCA club,
The Red
the
Cross.
American Red Cross club. Yeah.
And I was home, and there was a friend of Charlie's who stopped by and said, that, would Charlie come to tea? It was not there. I was there. And it was a small American, it was the counterintelligence corps actually had their office there. And I worked there eventually too. And that's where I met Pete. And this, I must tell you a story from there because, of course, I'll never forget that. They had coffee. I didn't drink coffee. I drank tea. And they had a layer cake there. Okay, I had never seen a layer cake in my life. We had cake too, but nothing,
Sure.
nothing the American layer cake. So actually, they had the cook that had been Rommel's cook
Yeah.
in South Africa. In Africa, was the cook there for the Americans and the English. So anyway, so here was this cake, and I'm offered a piece, and I eat it. Oh, so slowly, because it was oh so good. And then I was offered a second piece, and I said, I can't do that, because I would just be like another greedy, starving German. And I never had that second piece of cake.
Oh, you remember that to this day?
I remember
Wow.
that.
Yeah.
And that happened on the 31st of March of 1946. Isn't that amazing how you can remember some things?
Yeah.
Because obviously I could have eaten the whole cake, right?
But it also shows your pride in how you were
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just
growing
did-
amongst.
Yeah, I did
growing
not
within
want to
yourself.
appear like another, sort of homeless fool, so to speak. Yeah, you have a little bit of pride. You do, We just.
But I ate
What's
a
the
lot. I
strength?
ate donuts and drank coffee in Bremerhaven, where I worked with Americans there.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
gosh,
yeah.
very good. I ate and ate.
Wow, this has been great. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Are there any final comments or questions that you would like to share with our
We
community?
could do 6 more hours.
I
Well,
know.
yeah. Well, all I can say again, who I am is really the biggest impact, of course, was my growing up in the community there. First of all, of wonderful people, a wonderful mother, very strong mother who raised us, and my dear sisters, and then meeting Pete and going through the war, and when people, there are wars, there are always wars, it seems. But this is why I'm very definitely I'm a worker for peace, because I know what it feels like, and it's not. I mean, at that point, national pride goes out the door for me, because it's really about human beings, and it's not about just our little segment or our little town or my little neighborhood. It's family, right? The whole world,
Right.
So it's people and nature that I pledge my allegiance to. That's who I am.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
We are just blessed to have you both.
Okay.